Hey everybody, this is Brian with Bear Cards 34, and today I'm back with another show and tell video. This one will be featuring 1989 Topps. For those of you familiar with these show and tell videos, this is where I dissect the set of NFL football cards produced that year, give a little background on the set, the players, the history. These are not quick rip videos where I'm looking for a hit. These are longer videos, but for the people who really just enjoy the hobby and the cards. And so this set, 1989, featured about, what was it? I think 396 cards in the set. I really liked a few years earlier when they were doing, I think it was 528, so you could get even more players. However, this year they did also release the Topps Traded set, which had 132 cards. And what was unique to this set was this was the first time that Topps had produced rookie cards of players who were actually rookies in 1989. Prior to this, you would have to wait at least a year to get the rookies football cards. And so this contained things like Barry Sanders, Troy Aikman, some of the great players. The 1989 draft was fantastic. And anyway, this video I'm titling 1989 Topps and Friends, and the reason for that, for those of you familiar with this time period of cards, is that Topps was no longer the only card company in the game. We had Score, and we also had Pro Set, and I featured Neil Anderson for a couple reasons. He's a Bear, my favorite team. He was one of my favorite players of the time. And also Action Packed was a fourth product that came in, and they did a test run. They only made 3 teams. It was the Bears and the Redskins and the Giants. And so these Chicago Bears, these look exactly like the 1989 cards. However, they were from a year earlier. And so each of these sets, the one thing, right here, what made me really excited as a collector as a kid was that Score and Pro Set each highlighted or had cards that had full color photos on the back. Topps was not yet to that point, so they still had kind of that vintage feel. However, the Score and Pro Set had those pictures, which were pretty great actually, and I thought I was pretty excited about that as a kid. Now, another card you could pick up back then were from the figurines for the starting lineups, and so that is the Neil Anderson from that year for the starting lineups. So there really were a lot more opportunities for cards than ever before, and that is why with this series, instead of just doing one long video, I'm going to do a few long videos. So I'm breaking it up into chunks, and because there are multiple sets, I'm doing it by team based on the order that they came out in the top set. One other card of note for Neil Anderson from there was the 1,000 Yard Club card, which every pack of Topps contained a 1,000 Yard Club card. Neil Anderson was able to get that. So the Topps set, along with the 396 base cards, the 132 Topps Traded, and they also had 24 1,000 Yard Club cards. We can thank Mike Rozier for that. He ended the year with 1,002 yards, just squeaking in and giving him a card in that set as well. All right, so as always, the top set would include checklist cards. And this year, they also featured the Super Bowl. Right here, we have the Super Bowl from 1988. So again, these cards would feature the games and the season of 1988 and come out in 1989. So the 49ers beat the Bengals 20-16 in Super Bowl 23 from the previous year. That Super Bowl was held in Miami at Joe Robbie Stadium. Score, along with doing the Super Bowl cards, also had some championship cards. So for the AFC, the Bengals defeated the Bills. And very sadly, the 49ers defeated the Chicago Bears. So right here, Score also featured the Super Bowl. Right there we have a picture of Jerry Rice, who was named the MVP of Super Bowl 23. Had a great game. Now, I remember that game very well as a kid. I was actually rooting for the Cincinnati Bengals, and the reason for that was this guy right here. James Brooks. He is one of my all-time favorite players. And so I was really, really rooting for them. Although I like the 49ers, always respected the 49ers. But I was hoping that the Bengals were going to win that game, just for James Brooks, if nothing else. Like I said, Jerry Rice, greatest receiver of all time, was the MVP that year. Now, I will say that Pro Set also featured a Super Bowl card. This was the design, so they had a set of Super Bowls from the past. And the Super Bowl, most notably, was the late comeback by the 49ers, the rally with Joe Montana. So for those of you who remember, the 49ers were trailing at the end of the game. Joe Montana took the 49ers on a last-minute drive. And this guy right here, this is his rookie card, John Taylor, scored a touchdown from Montana to Taylor with 34 seconds left. It was quite the catch, quite the play, very memorable. Another rookie, this is Harris Barton's rookie card. He was actually drafted in '87, but this was his first appearance in a card. He had his scorecard as well as his Pro Set, but they did not make a Topps card for him that year. And Harris Barton had a really, a pretty cool quote in the Super Bowl where or about the Super Bowl, talking about just how cool under pressure Joe Montana was, where they were lined up in the huddle. There, it was a very tense situation there. And he looked up into the crowd and then turned to the players and basically said, "Hey, isn't that John Candy over there in the stadium?" And it just kind of loosened everything up for everybody and helped them stay calm. And they even referenced that story in the movie Draft Day. But it's a pretty great story that I remember from way back then. I remember Harris Barton talking about that in an NFL Live video. So just to kind of set the time period just a little bit, for 1989, the year these cards came out, some of the top movies included Batman starring Michael Keaton, Back to the Future Part 2, Little Mermaid, When Harry Met Sally, and one of my all-time favorite sports movies, Field of Dreams. That was just a classic that I loved growing up. So I have the Project 70 card with the Field of Dreams game with the Yankees and White Sox, just kind of a reminiscent of the Field of Dreams cover, from back in the day. The Nintendo Game Boy came out. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar retired. The Simpsons premiered, still going on these days. And top songs included Like a Prayer by Madonna, Another Day in Paradise by Phil Collins, We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. And it was also the year that of the debut album of my all-time favorite band, Nirvana. Their album Bleach was released. It cost them $606.17 to make that album. And it would be another couple years before they hit it big with Smells Like Teen Spirit. But their first album came out that year as well. Now, this set also featured some record breakers. For example, we had Dan Marino with the most seasons of 4,000 or more yards passing. At that point, he had 5,000 yards in 1984, which was also a record, but that was the fourth time in his career and he passed Dan Fouts, who had done it 3 times. Marino would get it 2 more times and almost got it a couple others as well. This is also with Steve Largent, most receptions and yards in a career. He ended up with his career with a little over 13,000, which, to put in perspective how much the game has changed and the offense has opened up, Jerry Rice is now the all-time leader with almost 10,000 more yards, and Steve Largent is currently in 19th place all-time. And then receiving, he retired with the record at 819. Jerry Rice almost doubled that. And Steve Largent now currently ranks 31st. But again, it's not all about the statistics. You've got to pay attention to the time period and the way the game was played. And Largent was dominant during his career, one of the greats all time. Eric Dickerson also had a record breaker with the most seasons at the start of a career with 1,000 yards rushing. That was his 6th straight. Barry Sanders ended up playing 10 years and had 1,000 yards all 10 seasons. Emmitt Smith did have 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons, but not to start a career. He did not have 1,000 yards his first year. And then we've got Tim Brown, one of my all-time favorite players. Tim Brown, that was a record for return yards for most combined net yards gained as a rookie with over 2,300, which is very impressive. There's also this, I don't know that I'd necessarily call it a record breaker. I love the card though, Tony Dorsett. It's just mentioning that he passed Jim Brown to become the second leading rusher of all time, playing his final year in Denver. But I really do like that card. We also had statistic leaders from '88. So we got the interception leaders, Eric McMillan and Scott Case. We have the rushing leaders, Herschel Walker and Eric Dickerson. The receiving leaders, two underrated guys, Henry Ellard and Al Toon. And the passing leaders that year were the late Wade Wilson and Boomer Esiason. Another nice card, there were a couple specialty cards. Not in tops, they didn't really have many of those, but the Cowboys paid tribute to Tom Landry. This is when Jimmy Johnson had taken over. And ProSet also had a card. This is the Pete Roselle commemorative card. After that, Paul Tagliabue took over. And this is just a reissue Santa card, but ProSet did have that. The Santa Claus card, they're actually quite rare, so I don't have the real one. But I did pick that one up just, I don't know. I normally don't do that, but I have a couple times been a sucker for stuff like that. Okay, so another specialty card I'll show here is the Merlin Olson announcer card. They did these announcer cards for ProSet for some of the current announcers. And we'll see, James Brown, a young James Brown, who's still going strong, along with, we have JB and then Terry Bradshaw as well. So there's Terry. Merlin Olson, he was my favorite just because, mostly he went to Utah State, my alma mater, my parents' alma mater, so we were big fans of Merlin, and he was also on Little House on the Prairie, which I liked to watch when I was a kid. A young Bob Costas as well. We got Chris Berman, and a younger Al Michaels as well. All right, so each top set contained a team card. The 49ers right here, they had quite a good year once again. They went 14-2 in 1989 and won another Super Bowl where they had a blowout against the Broncos. The next season, ProSet made a commemorative card of that as well. The head coach at the time was a new head coach, George Seifert. And George Seifert actually is another guy that I've been a fan of for a long time. So George Seifert, who's 82 years old now, he moved from the defensive coordinator to the head coach. He's a 5-time Super Bowl champ as a coach, 2 of those as head coach, and he ended his career with a 114-62 record, which was the second best winning percentage in the NFL history when he resigned as the 49ers head coach. He also coached for the Panthers for a few years, but I was a fan of his because he attended University of Utah. He played guard and linebacker for the Utes. Then he was hired as a head coach of Westminster College in Salt Lake City when he was only 25, and then worked his way up the ranks in the 60s and 70s. And, he had a 10-5 postseason record. And the 49ers for Super Bowl 23, they actually won that on his 49th birthday. So a pretty nice birthday gift for sure. Next up, I'll just show a couple of the Hall of Famers from this set from Topps. So we got Charles Haley, Ronnie Lott, Steve Young, another guy who played his college ball in Utah at BYU. And there were 2 1,000-yard club players for the 49ers that year. Roger Craig, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, and Jerry Rice. And Score did a nice little great combos insert set, subset, and that's the Jerry Rice and Joe Montana. So I mentioned earlier that John Taylor, this was his rookie year. He did also have rookie cards from ProSet as well as Score. And with Score, he was also that year an All-Pro as a punt returner. So they made a couple cards of him. He was drafted by the 49ers in the 3rd round back in 1986, and he played his full 10-year career with the Niners. Rice and Taylor were quite the receiving duo, and he had 3 Super Bowl championships, 2 Pro Bowls, and he was a member of the 80s All-Decade team. Another one I just wanted to highlight real quick right here, this is Jeff Fuller's rookie card. And again, they made Score, Topps, and ProSet. He was a very talented defensive back, a safety, and he was a 5th-round pick back in '84, 3-time Super Bowl champ, but he only played in 2 because, unfortunately, in this year of 1989 in October, versus the Patriots. He had a career-ending spinal injury. The game was actually played at Stanford University due to the San Francisco earthquake that damaged Candlestick Park. And so unfortunately, that injury was quite serious, and he can walk, but he doesn't have the use of one of his arms. His son was a wide receiver in the CFL as well. All right, next up, we've got Guy McIntyre, and his only rookie card that year was from Score Supplemental. But he was a third-round pick in '84, 13-year career, and he made 5 Pro Bowls, won 3 Super Bowls. One of the first offensive linemen in modern NFL who was used as a fullback. So Bill Walsh, who was an announcer for NBC after he retired, Bill Walsh, when he had coached in 1984 during the NFC Championship game against the Bears, which the Bears also lost, they put Guy McIntyre in at fullback. And that motivated Mike Ditka to use a similar formation in 1985 with William the Refrigerator Perry. And basically the thought was with Mike Ditka, hey, if it works for blocking, maybe we can try running him too. And they even threw Perry a touchdown pass. So it all kind of started with that Guy McIntyre experience. So another guy who only had 1 rookie card, that was Wesley Walls. So this is his pro prospect from Series 2 of Pro Set. He was a second-round pick out of Ole Miss, played for the 49ers and the Saints. He was best known with the Panthers, and also a little bit he played with the Packers. So he's a one-time Super Bowl champ, and in 2001, many years later, he was an All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, and he's part of the Patriots Ring of Honor. So a very, very good tight end right there. All right, next up, we got the Bengals. So this right here is the Boomer Esiason team card. So the head coach that year was Sam Weish. And, the Bengals, after making it to the Super Bowl and almost winning against the 49ers, unfortunately, the next year they only went 8-8. They missed the playoffs. Very disappointing season for them. Hall of Famer of note, Anthony Munoz, one of the great offensive linemen of all time. And the 1,000-yard club card right here, we have Eddie Brown. James Brooks came very, very close. He had 900-something yards, over 5 yards a carry, if I remember right. And Ickey Woods also did. Score did these speed burner subset cards, and Eric Thomas was highlighted. One other little card of note right here would be Chris Collinsworth, because that was his final card as a player. And because I'm from Utah, I always like to give a shout out to the local guys. So that's a Leon White rookie card. He went to BYU was drafted in 1986 in the 5th round. He was the starting outside linebacker in Super Bowl 23. And in 1984, for the Holiday Bowl, he was the defensive MVP and part of the BYU National Championship team that year. So this right here, this was one of my favorite players. James Brooks was my very favorite on the team, but I loved Ickey Woods. I loved him. He was so much fun to watch. And so when the sets for 1989 came out, these were a big catch for me, to get these cards. And so for those of you who remember with Ickey Woods, he would score touchdowns, the Ickey shake, the Ickey shuffle, anytime he'd score a touchdown. He was so good as a rookie that there are still 30 Bengals franchise records that he held even 30 years later between the playoffs and regular season. So like I mentioned, he did surpass the 1,000-yard club and has a card highlighted right here. And, he had a 5.3 yard per carry average. James Brooks was over 5 yards a carry. Ickey Woods had 15 touchdowns that year, and his yards per carry was the best in the NFL. He also had 228 yards and 3 touchdowns in the playoffs. Unfortunately, in 1989, in only the second game of the year, he tore his ACL and was out for over a year. And he came back, but in the next 3 years, he only had 129 carries, 459 yards, and less than 3 yards a carry. Now, he did have 12 touchdowns. They'd put him in some of those short yardage situations and let him score. And if I remember right, I think they had said that he could no longer do the dance in the end zone. So when he would score, he'd have to go over to the sideline and do it. And it just wasn't the same. And unfortunately, he's kind of seen as a one-season wonder, but it was such a good season. He still appears in commercials and makes a few appearances. And shout out to Walkenbach, Brian over at Walkenbach. He did a video the other day and has a Leaf Pro Set throwback card of Ickey Woods that's autographed that is awesome. So definitely check his channel out. He's got some great videos, great content. And then this is from 1990, but it's a starting lineup where they would feature the rookie year of the different players. All right, next up we've got Rodney Holman. This is his rookie card. And again, he had score and pro set as well. He was a third-round pick, three-time Pro Bowler, played 14 years, including his last 3 with the Lions. At retirement, he had played in 213 games, which was the second most by a tight end in NFL history at the time. So I thought he was a worthy, notable player. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bills with the Jim Kelly team card. So in 1989, the year these cards came out, the Bills went 9-7, which was actually first in the AFC East, but they lost to the Browns. Close game, but they lost to the Browns in the first round of the playoffs. So for me, with this set, Marv Levy, one of the great coaches of all time, love that guy. Couple of the Hall of Famers of note from that team, and they have quite a few. Bruce Smith, Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, one of my all-time favorite players, James Lofton. So they had quite a few Hall of Famers there. One notable, they have the announcer cards. Here was O.J. Simpson. Back when I was actually a fan of his, great running back, and I thought he was great on NBC. That's kind of how I knew him. And nowadays not such a fan, but back then I love that guy. And that's this right here for my generation. That's how I remember him. That and the Loaded Weapon movies, things like that. And they had a score subset or insert called Predator, and that was the Bruce Smith highlight of that. So when I think of, this year for the Bills, it's all about Thurman Thomas. He was a rookie that year. That's his top super rookie card. We also have Pro Set, and here he is with his scorecard. So again, Thurman Thomas is one of the great all-around running backs of all time. He went to Oklahoma State, had an amazing career there. He was a Heisman candidate his senior year, and Barry Sanders, who's my second favorite player of all time, was his backup. He slipped to the second round. He was the 40th pick because of a knee injury. What's even crazier, though, is he was the 8th running back taken in the draft. So 7 players were picked ahead of him at that position. And then all he did was rush for over 12,000 yards, 4,500 yards receiving. He had almost 90 touchdowns, 5-time Pro Bowler, 90s All-Decade team, part of that historic 4 straight Super Bowl appearances by the Bills, and he was the 1991 MVP. His number 34 is retired. He's in the Pro Football and College Football Hall of Fame. He's the only player in the NFL history to lead the league in total yards from scrimmage for 4 consecutive years. And had the Bills won Super Bowl 25 versus the Giants, thanks, Scott, had they won, he would most likely have been the MVP. He spent 2000 with the Dolphins, but he was played pretty sparingly. And then he went and signed a one-day contract with the Bills when he retired. All right, next up, we've got Kent Hull, the very good Buffalo Bills center from those playoff runs that they had. He actually started off his first 3 years with the New Jersey Generals, blocking for Herschel Walker of the USFL. And then he had 11 years with the Bills. He was a 4-time All-Pro from 88 to 91. And he's part of the Bills Wall of Fame. Unfortunately, he passed away back in 2011. He was only 50 years old at the time. And then another really popular guy for the Bills, this would be Don Beebe. There's his tops, his score, and his pro set. Now, I hated this pro set card when I was a kid. It's a very blurry photo. It just looks like some Polaroid photo from a high school football game, even though that's a college game. But now I love that card. It just is so old school. You just won't see cards like that very often anymore. So Don Beebe, he was a 3rd-round pick in '89. He's from Aurora, Illinois. And he spent 6 years with the Bills. Then he also played for the Panthers and Packers. And he played in 5 Super Bowls. And even though he didn't win one in those 4 with the Bills, he did end up winning a Super Bowl with Green Bay. He's best known for Super Bowl 27, chasing down Leon Lett on a fumble recovery that Lett had, and he was about to score, and he put his arms out in celebration, and Don Beebe had just come streaking down the field, knocked the ball out of bounds into the end zone for a touchback, and it was very much a great example of never giving up. He talked after the game about how he was just he was really upset all game at how the game had gone. And at the time, he said it didn't mean anything to him. until after the game was over. He said the owner, Ralph Wilson, walked past everyone and went straight over to Beebe and said, "You showed me a lot today. You showed me exactly what the Buffalo Bills are all about." And that really meant a lot to him. And Beebe said that thousands of people wrote him letters after that, including Dallas Cowboy fans who were praising him for not giving up. Then we have Steve Tasker. So Steve Tasker genuinely is one of the great special teams players of all time. He was very small, 5'9", 180 pounds, but he was a very feared hitter and very fast. He was a 226th pick in 1985 by the Oilers as a wide receiver and special teamer. But they let him go, and Buffalo picked him up back in 1986. All he did after that was make it to 7 Pro Bowls. He was also the only special teamer ever named MVP of a Pro Bowl game back in 1993. And Jim Kelly called Tasker the greatest special teamer of all time. And a funny little story, Jim Haslett, one of the players on the team at the time, didn't even think that Steve Tasker was a player. He didn't even think he was on the team. But Steve said that he told Jim not to worry because he was mistaken for a boy all the time. It's kind of funny there. And then the last one for today is going to be this Frank Reich. He did not have a Pro Set rookie card. But Frank Reich, he's a very, very good backup quarterback. He was a third-round pick out of Maryland in 1985 and played a decade with the Bills as Jim Kelly's backup. But what a backup he was. He was great. He actually spent 4 years with additional teams after that. But he's, for me, best known as the Bills quarterback who made the greatest comeback of all time. So, in 1992, there was a wild card game. It was against the Oilers. Jim Kelly was out. Reich was starting. They were down 35-3 in the third quarter. And anyone who saw this game will remember this. It was extremely memorable. He went on to lead the Bills to a 38-3 run to win in overtime. Largest comeback in NFL history. He then went on to play for the Panthers in 1995 and threw the very first touchdown in franchise history, which coincidentally was to former Bills tight end Pete Metzelaars. So there you go. After that, he began a coaching career. He's the Colts head coach as of now since 2018. They made a couple of playoff appearances so far. And the Pro Football Hall of Fame executive Bill Polian, who used to be a GM with the Bills back when they drafted Reich, called Reich the greatest backup quarterback in NFL history. All right, so last up, I am going to open up one of these packs right here to wrap things up, and then I'll be back with another one of these probably next week, and that is going to be starting us off with my Chicago Bears. So I'm very happy to be able to start with those guys for my next video. What I'd love to pull in here would be obviously a Thurman Thomas, Tim Brown. So I got the Patriots team card, Tony Eason, Dave Craig, scoring leaders. We got a Steve Largent record breaker. Drew Hill, the late Drew Hill, very good player. Eugene Marv, Giants team card, receiving leaders. Montana, 49ers. Dexter Manley, Buccaneers team card. Wow, lots of team cards. Chiefs, Chargers, Harry Hamilton, and a Roger Craig 1,000 Yard Club. All right, well, please like and subscribe. Hopefully you guys found that video entertaining. Thank you for sticking with me if you made it this long. And I'll be back with more videos in the near future. Thanks, everybody.